developed into. That's a good thing.
This afternoon, political strategists Bruce Hawker and Andrew Bragg. Very good to see you both. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Look, as one MP put it to me, it's a bit of mutually assured destruction, not on the Korean Peninsula, but on the citizenship thing, where both sides are obviously digging up information on others, and on it goes. And Bill Shorten this afternoon has tried to settle a lot of the questions around his own status producing those documents. Bruce, do you think he should have? Was he right to do that?
I think he was. I think he probably delayed it a bit too long as well. But I also think that Tony Abbott was a bit rich in coming out and attacking him for not doing so, because we all remember that Tony Abbott took about 15 years to reveal that he was no longer a British citizen.
My colleague Sam Maiden points out, she asked many, many times for him to do the same, and he refused.
Took him till 2014, I think, to do it. So I think that's a bit rich on his part, but so be it. I actually think it's a distraction. I don't think Labor really should allow this thing to linger. I think Bill Shorten did the right thing, and all the MPs who might be under...
They're spending a fair bit of time in question time on it still, about the legitimacy of Barnaby Joyce and so on. Do you reckon maybe get off that and get on to other things?
Oh, no. I think Labor has got a legitimate argument there about Joyce, because he hasn't resigned his position from the ministry, and he is now, or will be in a few days, the acting Prime Minister. So it raises questions about the legitimacy of acts done administratively by him. But I do think Labor tactically shouldn't allow the argument to be sidelined into why some of their people aren't revealing their information.
Now, Andrew, what do you reckon? I mean, the government says we should be talking about issues that are far more important, North Korea, energy prices and so on. Usually when governments say that, they are reluctant to talk about the problem they've got. There is a problem here around, the citizenship issues for Barnaby Joyce and Fiona Nash and so on. How worried do you think the government really is about this?
Well, David, I think it's curious that Mr Shorten took so long to release the papers. I think Bruce is right, he dragged it out for too long. But I think now there's no case for anyone to leave their papers in any concealed way. So I think people that are trying to stonewall will have to release their papers now at some point. But in terms of the relative relevance, I think people are more interested in their skyrocketing power bills than whether or not people are satisfying Section 44 of the Constitution.
That's probably true. But from what you're saying, the likes of Julia Banks, Michael Keenan, Tony Passon, maybe, I don't know, others are all going to have to put out some paperwork pretty soon. I mean, Answood Marlis has this afternoon.
Yeah. Look, I think that's right. And at the end of the day, I mean, both the Labor and Liberal parties have pretty stringent pre-selection processes. I think what we've seen in this process is the smaller parties have quite a number of deficiencies in their processes, and I think people have to now come clean if there are any questions.
Yeah, now, the same-sex marriage survey, the High Court challenge begins tomorrow on this one. There'll be 2 days of hearing. We don't know when they'll actually hand out a decision, but hopefully soon, because I think the ballots are meant to go out, or the surveys are meant to go out next week. A lot of this seems to me will hinge on whether this stands up as urgent expenditure of taxpayers' money, because that's the act that the minister's using here to spend this money. Andrew, I know you're involved in part in the Yes campaign here. What do you reckon about the chances of this actually standing up in the High Court?
If the High Court was to strike it down, I think it would be a significant check on the power of the executive. My sense is that the advice the government has is fairly strong. As I said, it would be a big check on power. And I
did it years ago on the the chaplaincy program in schools. They said no, you can't spend taxpayers' money in that way.
Yeah, I think that was some time ago, but I think in this case, I mean, there's a directive being given to the ABS. There's an appropriation that's been provided in these circumstances, and I think it would set a very strong precedent that would significantly limit future executive power, and I think the court will be wary of doing so.
Yeah, and Bruce, I don't know if Labor's holding its breath that this is going to be stopped by the High Court. I think most expect that it will go through.
Yeah, I think so, and I don't think they should be distracted by it, nor should the Yes campaign. I think they should just keep pushing hard on it, because, it may well be that the High Court is just going to say, it was sufficiently urgent, and therefore the executive had the power to do what it's done. It's up to the High Court. We'll find out in a little while, but I think the Yes case should just keep pushing and pushing hard, because otherwise they'll lose momentum, and that's a bad thing for any campaign.
Yeah, and look, there's a nightmare scenario for the government, I suppose, Andrew, if the High Court does knock it out. No one wants to talk about what they do then, but there will be a push from some, you know, to have a parliamentary vote. I think that's pretty clear. But boy, I don't know. What do you think Malcolm Turnbull would do in that situation?
Well, I think the government has done all it can to honour the plebiscite that it took to the last election, and if the unlikely scenario plays out that the High Court strikes it down, then I think you know, the government will need to think carefully about how it proceeds. My advice to all involved will be that the government should have some space to think carefully about what it wants to do next.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll want to have a good think about that, because they'll be scrambling from both sides to either have a parliamentary vote or absolutely rule one out. Energy policy is obviously the big challenge for the government in the final months of this year. And today it was expected to receive this report from the energy market operator about how much shortfall we're facing when it comes to baseload power, so coal, gas, and maybe renewables if there's batteries. Baseload is the stuff you can turn on 24 hours a day, regardless of whether the wind's blowing, the sun's shining and so on. Once it's got that information, it'll then presumably be able to work out how much coal we need to keep in the system. Bruce, this is going to be a difficult one, not just for the government, for Labor as well, I suppose, because, you know, there's a love-hate relationship with coal in the Labor Party, it seems to me, and they've chopped and changed in terms of, you know, how much support should be given to coal, or how much pressure should be brought on the coal-fired power stations to close down. Where do you see this going?
Well, you know, state Labor in South Australia has struggled with the issue with renewables. In Victoria, the state Labor government was attacked, even though when they decided to close down Loy Yang, I think it was. But of course, that was a decision of the owners, not the government, because these big energy companies are now moving to renewables. They see that as being the future. It is a big issue. And then we see in Queensland, Labor government there being under some pressure because of its support for the Adani coal mine, which a lot of people who are voting Labor or say they're going to vote Labor are very uneasy about. So this is one of those issues. It's a bit like, I guess, gay marriage, you know, where people who traditionally support one of the major parties are very, very split, and it's a vexed issue for Labor. Hopefully, though, we'll see some real leadership from the Prime Minister on this one. I'm not holding my breath, but it would be good if we saw some leadership on it, because every day that we don't actually start dealing with the whole question about renewables versus base load, all those industries which are built or trying to build themselves around renewable and sustainability are being done a big disservice by this government. So I'd like to see it not being a political football for a while.
Well, the problem is it has been for probably a decade now, Andrew, as you know. And look, if Turnbull can somehow manage to bring down emissions and bring down power prices, he'll be doing something no one's been able to yet. There are internal tensions there as well that are obviously, you know, opposition to a clean energy target. How confident are you about the PM being able to land this one?
Well, I think the most important thing is to put the science before the ideology. And I think I do feel sorry for the people of South Australia that have been experimented on, to use the Premier's own language. I mean, it's a pretty sad state of affairs that they've had these very high renewable energy targets, only to have to then turn around and build, with public money, a gas-fired power station. So I think it is a dog's breakfast. And I don't think that the useful way to think about this is to put the renewable energy target first. The most important thing to put on the table is we actually want to get emissions down, and that should really drive the rest of the policy.
Andrew Bragg, Bruce Hawker, good to talk to both of you. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon.
Pleasure.